Okay, so how many of you feel out there that you're just going through life and you say thank you and you're grateful, but the reality is you're just going through the motions? Maybe you are grateful and you're overly
The
grateful.
Lillian McDermott
Well,
Show.
today, just fasten on your seatbelts because we are going to talk about gratitude with Diane Butler Bass and new book, Grateful. So here you go. It's time to dance. Did I tell you, Diana? It's time to dance.
Don't even tell me that I can do it.
If you're in need of hope, you know where I'll be. I'll be right here.
This is your morning calisthenics. Let's do it.
There you go.
Friend, you can count on me. I'll be right here. Right here waiting for you.
A sip of my
This is
tea.
the place you can always turn to when you need a friend. The Lillian McDermott Show. To reach out to Lillian, visit her on the web at whenyouneedafriend.com. Now let's all learn together. Here's Lillian McDermott.
Hello, my listening friend. It's so nice we can meet each other on the air on this beautiful best day ever. And for those of you who are new to the Lillian McDermott Radio Show, let me tell you, you're in for a treat because many of us are going through life just feeling disconnected. And there might be a little bit of truth that we need to kind of permeate into our system. But let me tell you what this show is all about. I am committed to provide alternative ways to heal. And it is my mission to make awareness, responsibility, and truth a part of our everyday life. And I hope you, my listening and my viewing friends, will feel empowered to embrace a new truth and live the life of your dreams. Now, today we're giving away a book. Yes, we are. And you are, I've said this to you before, program it into your phone because the fifth caller or texter is going to win the book by Diane Butler Bass called Grateful, the Transformative Power of Giving Thanks. How do you give thanks? Do you go, thank you, like my daughter Brittany does? Thank you. So, and we always know when it's a sincere thank you. Anyway, most of us know about the feeling of gratitude, but what does gratitude look like to you? Have you been told, say thank you, be grateful, blah, blah, blah? What has it been? Well, the author of 10 books, not just one book, is Diane Butler Bass. And she's the author of a book called Grounded, which I've never read, but I'd like to learn a little bit more. Maybe we can talk about that during the breaks. But she will share her journey about experiencing gratitude and the practice of radical gratitude. So are you ready? And since it's our sole purpose in life to give and receive love and knowledge, I am grateful that we have Diane Butler Bass here to do just that. Welcome, Diana, to the Lillian McDermott Radio Show.
Oh, it's good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome.
I love the music. I think that's the most upbeat entry music I've ever been on a radio show with.
Well, it was written for me. I was, yes, that is my theme song. No, that's why we can put the theme song on our podcast and our YouTube videos, because it is mine. And so, but is anything ours anyway? It's just borrowed, I guess. But, so share a little bit about your background. Thank you for that compliment. And what led you to write this book, Today and Now?
Well, that's in a sense, a kind of a huge question. But I guess the simplest thing to say about who I am is that I'm a writer. I'm in my late 50s, and I've had a long career writing in the media, and I never intended to be a writer. It is something that was not my intended path. What I thought I wanted to do when I got into young adulthood was I wanted to be a college professor. So I went to university. I got a PhD from Duke University in religious studies. And my dream job was, teaching at some lovely little college in a great town and having generations of students in my classrooms. And in my very first job, I took a job working at a small religiously based college, and I didn't fit. That's what they told me.
Aren't you grateful for that?
Well, I became grateful for it, as I write in the book. But it was really hard, because I thought that I had got my dream job when I was in my 30s, and what happened was I didn't get tenure, and so it was 4 very difficult years in which I was fighting for something that I thought was supposed to be my path, but it didn't work out. It wound up being hugely conflicted, and it actually made me physically sick, all kinds of things. And so, but it was during that time when I was fighting for that job that this little college was in Santa Barbara, California. And I got to be friends with the local newspaper editor. And it was years ago, it was a great small newspaper. It was owned by the New York Times. And so one day we went out to lunch, and he said, "Would you like to work for the paper?" And I thought, what? And he said, "I've seen some things you've written." He said, "I think you'd be a really good newspaper columnist." And so this was in the early 1990s, and there it was, a different door just opened for me over lunch. And that's what I started to do. And so my path changed. I taught part-time at UC Santa Barbara instead of the small college. Then I also worked part-time for the newspaper. And so what that meant is that I was combining for a long time in my early career, teaching in a fairly traditional way, and also then writing in public, in doing opinion pieces in the newspaper, et cetera. And eventually a publisher said, "You should write a book." And I thought, wait a second, my brother was supposed to be the writer.
Isn't it amazing how we have these limited beliefs about ourselves, and then it takes someone to say, "Hey, maybe you should consider," and that big old yes that you said is what changes everybody's life. And we're going to continue our conversation with Diane Butler Bass when we return worldwide at whenyouneedafriend.com. We'll be right here waiting for you. Isn't it true? Isn't it true that yes? Now, you could have said, "No, I'm going to continue fighting, and I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing." But look at what you've been able to gain. And I call each book, each article, a baby. Look at how many things you've birthed.
It has been extraordinary, and it was completely unplanned and unexpected. So it's taught me a lot to be able to look for what I'm not expecting. So sometimes, and I love to plan. Oh my gosh, I'm the person who, there's the test called the Myers-Briggs test, which is a personality test. And my ideal personality is to be a field general, which means I love marshaling resources and making plans and coming up with strategic moves and all this sort of stuff. And what I've learned over these last 3 decades is that I can plan all I like. But I really need to be open for the unexpected and synchronicitous thing, because so often that's what happens rather than the plans.
Yeah. What is that saying? If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Oh, yeah. And I think it's interesting because you talk about responsibility. So I think we have a responsibility, to plan, and think about who we are, and what we're gifted at, and prepare ourselves well for the future. But then what happens is sometimes we get so
focused on
reined
the plan.
in. I was thinking by the fences we create in our own lives, that we don't have the capacity when, the college president looks at you and says, "Sorry, you're fired." I literally have had friends that's happened to, and they were never able to put their lives back together.
Isn't that sad?
It is sad. And one friend that same thing happened to him, and he literally wound up dying just a few years later of a brain tumor. And I would never blame cancer on any individual, but it was interesting because it was kind of paradigmatic.
There you go. If you see me doing this, That
Uh-huh.
means look at the time. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You can text Lillian McDermott.
So if you go, I go.
at
If I see you tapping, if you see me tap, that means wrap it up.
Okay.
Once again, here's Lillian.
Welcome back to the Lillian McDermott Radio Show, where we always learn with one another. Today's teacher is Diane Butler Bass. Look at that. She started back to teaching. Even though she was didn't continue teaching in college, she's a teacher on the show today, and I'm really excited. The fifth caller or texter will get the book Grateful, The Transformational Power of Giving Thanks. Great book, by the way, Diana. And I'm excited that we get to talk about gratitude. It's one of my favorite topics, as a matter of fact, on the show.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Most people think, okay, well, let me just give you an insight. I love every topic we talk about, but what makes my heart sing, what lifts me up, because it could be as a writer, as a radio show host, or whatever, we can get isolated focusing on the message and not necessarily realize, oh my gosh, there's a mess I'm creating while I'm creating the message. And so it's really important to sit back and watch or feel and experience. But you have a story of your own transformational experience of gratitude as you start the book. Would you like to share a little bit about your journey with gratitude?
Yeah, the fascinating thing about this being my 10th book is that the other 9 books that I have written, and I love all of them. As you said, they're like the books and articles are like babies. And so each one of them has its own life, and each one is beautiful in its own unique way. But all the other 9 things that I wrote came from a sense of my own expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as a person who had taught religious studies and trained in Christian theology and church history and all these things, I was writing out of that.
Mm-hmm.
This book, I did not write out of my expertise. I actually wrote this book out of a sense of my own need to learn and my own lack. And so the book opens with a funny anecdote about the day that I received literally a thank you note after I had sent a thank you note. And the thank you note.
Accurate.
I know. It was like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? Do you send a thank you note again for thanking the person who just sent you a thank you note because you sent them a thank you note? And
that's a lot of gratitude.
It is. And I literally froze and I didn't know how to respond. And I kind of gave up and I said, this is why it's so hard. This is why people get frustrated about gratitude, And so I open with that anecdote, but then I quickly go into, the fact that gratitude had been a struggle for me most of my whole life. And what's not in the book is a real personal piece that was the original prompt for me to write the book was my last book, a book called Grounded. That was wrapped up in 2014. It came out in 2015. And so I was thinking about a different project at the end of 2015. And I thought back about what had been going on in my life. And I had 2 friends who passed away while I had been working on Grounded. One was 72, a New Testament scholar who was a great mentor to me. And then a woman who was in the media, and she worked at Publishers Weekly, and she was 82. And I really missed both of them. And I thought about why I missed them. And even though they were very different and had come to my life in different ways, they were both really grateful people. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't feel like I am. And I really stopped and I thought about my own life. And I said, okay, I'm going to be here for another 20, 25, 30 years.
Probably more.
I hope so. And when I pass away, what will people who I mentored say about me? And I thought that gratitude would not be something that would come to the top of their minds. And I literally looked in the mirror and went, oh! I didn't like that idea.
Sure.
that people would not remember me with that sense. So that was the initial personal thing that got me to this topic, was to realize that this was something that was really strongly present in two people who mattered to me a great deal. And here in my late 50s, I was not, I didn't know what gratitude was really all about. And that's what launched this project.
I love it. I love it. And you know what? I'm glad it did, because many people, and this is something that as a life coach, I think that everybody wants to do, right? But taking out their soul shovel and digging until they see their reflection, or seeing the truth about them, that is where the magic happens. That's where true illness is eliminated. That's where the beginning of healing starts. And so in you writing this book, it was kind of like your transformation from a caterpillar to a butterfly almost.
Yeah, it was really an interesting journey, because as I was writing and as I was intellectually learning, which is something I love to do, obviously if you're talking to somebody who has a PhD in something, they love to read books and they love to study things and grapple with ideas. But this was really about that and changing my own capacity for gratitude. And so throughout, I kept thinking, everybody says gratitude is a journal, keep a journal. And what I learned, it really was a journey. Yeah. And so it took me to places I did not anticipate going.
Well, isn't it true? Okay, so for those of you who would like a copy of the book Gratitude by Diane Butler Bass, it's the transformative power of giving thanks. Be the fifth caller or texter, 407-373-5959. So here's, as I'm going through this journey with you, I'm realizing that expectation is the kryptonite of gratitude.
Right. Is that we feel like we expect or we're entitled to certain kinds of things in our lives.
Yes.
And almost all of the stories I tell where gratitude eluded me, or I learned something about gratitude, were stories about unexpected consequences. So the thing that I said initially, about my own path of being a writer, at first, when I lost my job as a college professor, I was so angry. Because I had worked hard for that. I was entitled to it. I had earned that position. I had earned that tenure. I deserved it.
Sure.
And when I didn't get it, the sense of rage, that emerged out of that was really frightening almost. And I remember the conversation that I report in the book. Is the college president. He looked at me and he just said, you don't fit here. One day you're going to look back on all this and you're going to thank me. And I was like, no way. I wanted to punch him in the face. I didn't thank him. I wasn't going to send him flowers or something. And so I went out with a friend, and I was reporting this conversation to my friend. And my friend said and I expected my friend to say, yeah, what an outrage, And my friend literally looked at me and said, he's right. And I said, what?
And then you punched your friend in the face.
Well, I really liked my friend, so I wasn't going to hurt him, but I was just shocked. And so he said, probably one day you will. And then my friend told me, and my friend's very public about these kinds of things. My friend is a recovered alcoholic, and he said, one time I lost a job, and I actually now am very thankful that happened to me, because that was my bottom, and it was the thing that forced me into recovery. And then my friend said, I know that's not your issue here. You've got other things going on.
Yeah.
He said, but what changed my capacity to understand that moment was when I began to offer thanks. And then my friend challenged me to write down one thing a day that I was grateful for.
Oh, isn't that amazing? It's life-changing.
Yeah, it really was. And I so I wrote about what happened when I kept that journal when I was in my early 30s and how it really changed my world. And I don't still keep I don't keep a gratitude journal now. I do other things that are my daily gratitude practice. But when I was in my early 30s and lost that job, that became something that really mattered.
Well, I always tell the story of the guy, the farmer that's called "We'll See." I don't know if you've heard the poem, and I'll maybe we can talk about it off the air. But when I was 10 years old, Diana, I listened to a homily from a priest, and I was going through my first communion at the time. Because I was a rebel even back then. I wasn't going to go through first communion at 7. I had to wait. So I was listening, and usually as a child, you really don't listen. But these words were so impactful to me. It molded my appreciation to everything in life. And he said that there are people who are upset or angry or hurt or whatever. They're just upset that they don't have the right shoes or they don't have a nice pair of shoes to wear. But then you look at your neighbor and you will discover that they don't have any feet.
Mm.
That, as a 10-year-old, impacted me to the point where I can still go to that moment and remember everything at that moment. I think that's all I remember from that homily. But that was planted really deep in me to the point where I would say, whatever is happening to me right now, it could be worse. And I don't know if that's a Pollyanna way of looking at things, but for me, it supported me through my life when there was things that I just didn't know why were happening, but knowing that I can be grateful for that at that moment, because the start of the gratitude was at least it wasn't worse.
Right. And it's not that you're celebrating somebody's misfortune.
No, not at
but
all.
it gives you the capacity to see what you really do have.
Correct.
Even when you might think you have lost everything.
Correct. And really
it's important.
That's right. Because rock bottom for some people could be death.
Right.
But if you're hitting rock bottom and you're still alive, there's a purpose and a mission for that. And even though at the moment you don't feel grateful, but you can always revisit that moment and go, this was life-changing for me. Like your friend.
And what I learned was that although it seemed like I had lost everything by not getting tenure, I was still incredibly talented. I could write.
That's right.
I had enormous number of gifts that were at my disposal, and they could be used in other ways. And so eventually by focusing on the gifts of my life, that's what gratitude helps us look at.
That's right.
I could reimagine my own life and reorder it and discover new paths. And so things were not nearly as hopeless as I had thought they were.
And it usually starts with a thought, right? We can think a thought of deprivation or lack, or we can think a thought of abundance. Either way, it all begins with a thought. And we're going to continue our conversation with Diane Butler Bass when we return worldwide at whenyouneedafriend.com. Please remember, 407-373-5959. Get you the copy of Grateful. Okay, so, I love this topic. It's gotten me out of gratitude. And I started my journal in my 30s too. My gratitude journal. But I've been journaling since I was a little girl. I've been journaling since I was 5. I just didn't know it was journaling. And, but I went back, and when I understand it, I was challenged. I remember Pope John Paul II challenged everybody before the millennium, the year 2000, to start a journal. And I think it was a challenge to start a gratitude journal. And that's when I realized, I don't know if you knew that.
No, I actually didn't know that. I'm going to go back and look for that.
Yes. And I'm tying it. So the Catholic Church did a Renew 2000. And my husband and I were the facilitators of our group. And that was one of the things, to start a gratitude journal. And and on there, and I'm thinking that it was there that I got the mandate to do it, because we were all doing it. And so I could have my facts mixed up, because it's been many years since then. I've
That was
slept
a while ago.
and I haven't slept at a Holiday Inn Express. So, so, so at this point, as you're peeling back the layers of gratitude and realizing where did that lack begin with you, where you felt, I don't know how to experience gratitude. What was the root cause of that?
Well, in the book, I actually tell a story that I had never told in public before, and that was my own Me Too story. And it was the time when it was summer. I was 14 years old, and my parents had invited an uncle of mine who was unemployed to come and live in our house that summer. And he wound up abusing me, and it was really a frightening and horrifying experience that took years and years and years and years to process. Mm-hmm. And so on one hand, as a little kid, I was like the neighborhood mystic. If you had known like Julian of Norwich or Teresa of Avila or one of those great medieval saints as a little
very
kid,
empathic. You're very empathic.
I was probably like that kid. That
Mm-hmm.
kid. I'd walk around forests and I'd talk to God, and I would I'd see God in the face of my neighbor, and so I was very naturally connected. Mm-hmm. But that terrible summer, it really caused me to collapse in on myself, and so things became really hard. And I think that anger and fear really inhibited my capacity to grow in the things that I was naturally good at, and that is that empathy and connection. And so it took a really long time of processing violence and injustice to begin to open me up to really flower to the places I felt like I had always wanted to as an adult. Mm-hmm. And so in the book, I just tell that story in a very upfront, not graphic kind of way. Mm-hmm. And
factual.
And I tell it because I want people to understand that even when you're talking to a person who looks like a person of privilege, a white woman who is a successful writer, is that we all bear incredible pain and incredible challenges that are invisible, and those that are invisible to everybody except the people who are closest to us, and so those things are often the very things that keep us from a life of gratitude and a life of hope or a life of joy. And we have a certain kind of responsibility, I think, for processing those and for coming to terms with them and for living out our gifts in the best way possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I do you have children?
I do. I have a stepson who is almost 30. He lives in San Jose. And I have a beautiful, amazing daughter with my second husband, who we've been married for 21 years.
Oh, okay, here we go. This is where I get to talk about
text Lillian McDermott or leave her a voicemail at 407-373-5959. Once again, here's Lillian.
Welcome back to the Lillian McDermott Radio Show, where you can hear us worldwide at whenyouneedafriend.com. I'm your host, Lillian McDermott, and it is my goal that we learn from each other. Make the person in front of you at this moment, even if it's the person in the mirror, your teacher. Learn as much as you can. And I always say, if you learn something new, you can go home and relax. And so that's always so enjoyable when you have a teacher like Diane Butler Bass, who her own personal journey of lack of gratitude, or not knowing if she even had possessed gratitude, that to be able to reveal it in this book. It's called Grateful, and it's the transformative power of giving thanks. If you struggle with being grateful, this is the book for you. And if you enjoy gratitude, this is the book for you. 407-373-5959. Fifth caller or texter, 407-373-5959. Now, I was explaining to Diana today, when we first met, that if you take one word one word about the show, it would be the word responsibility. Personal responsibility is what we talk about here on the show. Diana is a great example of that. So that you know, we record these shows and we put them on YouTube after the show is done. And she shared a story that's also in the book. And if you want to go to whenyouneedafriend.com, which is how you get a hold of me, whenyouneedafriend.com, click on that YouTube video. You want to hear her stories, especially if you're someone that have experienced a tragedy in your life, a tragic moment, an impactful moment in your life, and you just don't know how to get through it. So I want to encourage you to go to whenyouneedafriend.com, become a subscriber. While you're there, there's lots of little buttons that you can click on. YouTube is one of them. Subscribe on my whenyouneedafriend.com, subscribe on YouTube, like me on my social media. Let's stay connected, because responsibility, the way that we look at it, is a word that means blame, shame, fault, duty. Fine, I'll do it. I'll take responsibility. But the reality is that we are the creators of everything in our life. And if we take 100% ownership of our life, then it will lead us to empowerment and freedom. If we created it, we can uncreate it by the way we decide we're going to continue to live our lives. And there's a responsibility page at whenyouneedafriend.com. Become intimate with this page, because you will learn from that, taking personal responsibility, ownership for your life, how you can then live the life of your dreams. So I want to encourage you, while you're there at whenyouneedafriend.com, do it now, subscribe now. Ever since I've been asking for you to subscribe now, I'm so grateful that you've been listening. So if you haven't subscribed, why not? So let's do it. I am so grateful when you do. Okay, so another thing that I want to tell you is that while you're at whenyouneedafriend.com, please make sure you visit my sponsors. Without my sponsors, this show would not happen. So go visit them. Make sure you figure out ways that you can support them the way they're supporting the show. And last, you can reach me on iTunes, Google Play Music, so all podcast, YouTube, all the social media. And last but not least, you can call me at 407-373-5959. This is my personal cell phone. This is my radio show cell phone. And you can call, be the fifth caller or texter, to type in or call and say, I want the book Grateful. Fifth caller, 407-373-5959. And you will win a copy of Grateful. And so, Diana, I'm so grateful that you are with us today. Thank you.
It's good to be here.
Yes. So let's talk about the myths. As you're writing this book, you're discovering about you, you're discovering about we, the people. So you're not just looking at yourself, you're looking at the whole. So what are some of the myths you've been able to bust through this book?
I didn't know a lot about gratitude, and there were things that I had heard along the way, that gratitude was good for us and that it helped us towards greater well-being, personal well-being. And that's true. But some of the time, the way that had been presented to me was almost like gratitude was a sort of a magic pill. If you just do it enough, or if you just make sure you're thankful enough, is that everything will go right. And it was a little like in Christianity, we have this thing called the prosperity gospel. Mm-hmm. And that is, if you just sort of believe and you trust God enough, that all this money and wellness is going to come your way. And so I was always a little, sort of worried about gratitude because it sounded that way to me on occasion. So that was certainly one of the myths that I had to get through to understand how gratitude is good for us.
Yeah.
And that it's not a magic pill. It actually takes quite a bit of work.
And it has to be genuine.
Right. It has to be very authentic. It has to be linked with things that are kind of hard sometimes, like forgiveness and empathy and compassion. So gratitude opens up a whole group of very mature and complex human feelings and capacities that make us better people. And so that's why I think gratitude winds up being good, is that it is a pathway to a whole set of things that help us to live better in the world. So that was one myth I had, that it was easy.
No.
And it's certainly not. And the other myth is that it's only about me. And this was revolutionary for me personally, is that nearly every book I read about gratitude followed the same path. And that was the idea that gratitude is a great feeling, and that these feelings do good things for us. And you can move from gratitude just being a feeling to gratitude actually being a sustained way of life. And you can do that through, keeping a journal, making sure that some people are in gratitude groups, those kinds of practices that take gratitude from sporadic to a more permanent state of who we are. So that's the way most books run. And then I got to thinking about how anger and fear and injustice and all these different very negative feelings had blocked me from being able to experience gratitude. And I was thinking about our culture right now. And one of the things that pretty much every polling organization has discovered is that as a people, the United States is mired in negative feelings. And there was this huge study out in November 2015 that talked about how we registered higher on feelings of fear, anxiety, hopelessness, and mistrust than any other time that the pollsters could find in fairly recent American history, so recent decades.
Sure.
And because I don't think we can count the Civil War, but in the last 30 or so years. And so that got me to thinking, if gratitude is good for us as individuals, would gratitude be good for us as communities? And would it be possible, if we can move from feelings of occasional gratitude as communities? And I give the example in the book about the Chicago Cubs winning the World Series. And that was an explosion of gratitude, of thankfulness. Oh my gosh, we won. I've seen the very thing that my grandparents only dreamed of seeing, kind of moment. And that was all about gratefulness. And it poured out into the streets of Chicago. It poured onto the internet. People were so happy. Could we as a people take those kinds of ad hoc moments of gratitude and move it towards a more sustained practice of communal gratitude as a body of either individual kinds of communities, churches, businesses, schools? And would that have an impact on who we are politically as a large community of Americans? And that was something I did not anticipate. I anticipated writing a book about gratitude in my own life, and I do that throughout the book. And I encourage people to explore all that territory as individuals. But then I began to suggest that the second half of the book is, well, what would this look like if we took it seriously together? And, it winds up talking about a politics of gratitude, but I don't talk about that in a normal or expected way. I don't say, hey, you need to be a Republican or a Democrat, and if you're not, you're a bad person.
Yeah.
But I just opened the gateway for people to imagine, what would it look like if we really appreciated gifts of abundance? If we really could thank one another, what would that begin to do for us together?
Sure. And you talk about the gifts of gratitude when we can find something to be grateful for, but in the midst of tragedy, in the midst of trauma, mustering that gratitude is a special gift to be able to maybe later on go back to and say, okay, at this moment I'm not feeling grateful, and that's okay, but I need to process that through and feel that gratitude. And we're going to continue talking with Diane Butler Bass about her book, Grateful, when we return worldwide at whenyounneedafriend.com. We'll be right here waiting for you. Remember, fifth caller or texter, 407-373-5959. We'll get you a copy of the book. Okay. Can you imagine a world of gratitude?
Oh my gosh. I've actually cried sometimes when I've wrapped my mind around that sentence. And there's a quote towards the end of the book that has got to be my favorite quote in the whole 200 and some odd pages. And it comes from Brother David Stendhal Rast, who just turned 90.
Yes.
And he's written more about gratitude than pretty much any living person. And he says, if you're grateful, you're not fearful. And if you're not fearful, you're not violent. And then he goes on and he says that grateful people appreciate other people for everything that they are. And if you appreciate other people, then you can share. And if we were not fearful, and if we were not violent, and if we really appreciated one another, and if we could really share, it would take down, as he says, this pyramid structure of power that's been oppressing all of us.
Yeah.
And that quote it takes my breath away every time I read it.
Yeah. Christy Nelson is the executive director of gratefulness.org. And just love hearing her, talk about David. David, I can never remember his. You said it so.
I think it's.
I have to read it.
Yeah,
I have to. Yes, I have to read it. Actually, I have to phonetically write it anytime I have to say his name. But he is really an inspiration to so many, and it's amazing. You have a call to action. And I'd love to talk about that call to action. You get people involved in, how to create that awareness of gratitude in your life and translating it from me to we. Maybe we can go there on the next segment, because it's so important that people feel empowered. Because I'm wondering if, as people are listening to this, if my listeners are actually going, I struggle with gratitude.
Yeah.
And you talk about fear and your rage at that university. It's fear and raging, not from that person talking to you, but going back to that moment when your uncle violated you.
Right.
So we tried to take away that child that was so connected.
Right.
It's that fear that brings us back to those moments that we don't even know how it affects our body.
Yeah.
And being able to release that and be able to share it, so that the fourth step of responsibility is using that to benefit others.
Right.
And that's what you did with this book.
And that's what I feel like my call is for the next 20 or 30 years. And I do think that that's a place that you get at a certain point in life.
You can count on me. I'll be right here waiting for you.
That's a little loud.
You can text Lillian McDermott or leave her a
There we
voicemail.
go. This is the last segment. Can you believe it?
No, I can't, actually.
Once again, here's Lillian.
Welcome back to the Lillian McDermott Radio Show, where we always learn and grow together. Today's teacher is Diane Butler Bass. The book is called Grateful. Fifth caller or texter, 407-373-5959. We'll get you a free copy. And I am not looking, I don't even know if we've gotten beyond. I'm sure we are gotten beyond, because I keep hearing the buzzing. So I know that, but so just keep texting, keep letting us know, and I want to ask you, my listening friend, and my viewers as well, what is your relationship with gratitude? Is there an entitlement feeling that, if you're angry or that you didn't get something, can you sit with the fact that maybe there's something else better for you? The example that Diana gives us about not making tenure in her university, it was her dream. That was a horrible thing that led her to a defining moment in her life where she discovered her passion. What is being kept from you right now? Or what are you being kept from? Or what are you keeping yourself from that could potentially, with gratitude, lead you to the path that you should eventually take? I mean, do you find that, Diana, that in your life, whenever you're in resistance and you're feeling that entitlement or that emotional, I have lack, it should have been mine type of thing, that when you just shift to, there's something better out there for me, how does that move you?
Yeah, it's really important to, I think, it was important in my journey. And I think it's important for many people when you're in that moment and you say, well, everything should have been different.
Yeah.
That can come from a sense of privilege or entitlement, and
Right.
often does with, with white people, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we think these things are naturally ours. But it's also important to recognize that there are systems and structures that are in place that create injustice in the lives of other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can run into this moment where somebody takes something away from you, you feel entitled to, or you can run into it because you're human, and there's just a block there of some structure
Mm-hmm.
that's never going to let you live your fullest life because you happen to be, say, a woman of color or a person who doesn't fit into society in the way that is what is considered to be the right kind of way of living. And so those moments can come because someone takes something from you, or there's a system that blocks you.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, there's a lot of different responses we can have as people. Is that we can kind of fall into the moment and just say, "Oh, everything's unfair," or we can become deeply angry, and those are human feelings, and we should recognize them.
Mm-hmm.
But then we have to move beyond those, and that's when we get to say to ourselves, "What response do I choose in this moment?"
Mm-hmm.
And you can choose to have a life where you are going to say do justice and make sure that those systems don't exist for the next generation of people.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can learn a new pathway, like is what I did.
Mm-hmm.
So not everybody's response in that moment is going to be exactly the same, but what I do think has to happen for our very best living is that we can take the negative emotions that emerge in moments of injustice, moments of fear, moments where we've felt like our path has been destroyed, and we can say, what is there here now? And how can I live in such a way that my gifts are lived out to their fullness, and I can be a pathway of joy for others?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, that it doesn't happen overnight, but it can happen. And so I talk about how that happens in my book. But I think that it's really important to recognize that gratitude, I didn't sit there and say, oh, I'm so grateful for getting fired.
No.
Yeah. And sometimes I belong to a lot of churches, and sometimes Christians are really bad offenders at this, is that when something bad happens, someone in a church will almost always say to you, oh, you should be really grateful for that because it's good. And even the president of the college said, oh, one day you'll look back on this and you're going to be grateful you were fired.
Yeah.
What I make it really clear in the book that we have to be so careful never to be grateful for an injustice. We never are grateful for when violence is done to us. We're never grateful for something that creates victims.
Great point.
What the New Testament says, and I draw a lot out of the New Testament in this book in a very generous and open way so that anyone who's listening who's not religious can see these verses for their wisdom, not as cudgels, which sometimes the Bible is used as.
Sure.
But there's a really important verse in the New Testament that lots of people who are in churches quote about gratitude. And that verse is, in everything give thanks. And when I had heard that as a little girl, it was like, well, something awful happens. Oh, give thanks for that. But that's not what it says.
No.
And I make it, I talk in the book about how the verse actually in Greek is in everything give thanks.
Mhm.
And that little word at the beginning of the sentence, in, that we render in English, in Greek is en, en. And that means through. And so in Greek, the verse actually means through all things give thanks. And that is much more, that is a really powerful vision.
Well, I'm glad that we're talking about this, being grateful for versus, and okay, so Romans 8, one of my favorite verses in Romans 8, or I remember reading Romans 8 kind of like, oh, until I got to, I'm sorry, Romans, until I got to Romans 8. And that's when I woke up, and that's what resonated with me, which is through all things, that things work out for the good of all. And so sometimes, in my processing, I think, okay, this may not seem like it's good right now, but if I believe in that promise, that things work out for the good of all who love him, then that means that other people will benefit from. There's so much abundance. And so that means that included in the all will be me. And so being able to go back and saying, okay, I know that this is not good right now, and I don't feel very grateful for this right now, but I know that this will bless me, because a lot of people think that blessing has to do with good fortune. And I want to rewrite that, because blessing is the gift that comes from all situations.
Right. And our attitudes about gratitude are wrapped up in scarcity and abundance.
Sure.
And the idea, we've got in our brain that we live in a universe where gifts are scarce, and that there are people who control those gifts, and we have to go to those people and ask for those gifts, or those people in their benevolence or their malevolence, depending upon who they are, have to give us those gifts. And that is a lie.
It's true. You're right.
The gifts of the universe are everywhere, all the time, around us.
Yes.
And we actually live in a universe of abundance. If you believe in a God, every world religion teaches that God or the gods have created all the gifts that human beings will need for all of time to live in beauty and justice and love. And we don't live like that. We live as if the gifts are scarce, and people try to control the gifts. And I think that genuine gratitude takes us to that place of abundance and makes the scarcity look like what it is. It makes it look like a myth and a lie. And so if we can change the way we perceive the gifts of the universe, everyone who's trying to control the gifts of the universe, or systems and structures that try to control the gifts of the universe, they begin to lose their power over us. And it's pretty remarkable what can happen. It's actually what David Stendhal Rast talks about, the great Catholic monk, that if you're grateful, you're not fearful. If you're not fearful, you're not violent. And that gratitude can take down powers, structures of scarcity, and replace them with abundance.
Absolutely. And only when you're in the state of grace, are you able to see the blessing in everything and the abundance, and that we are abundant people. And thank you so much. And for those of you who would like to learn more, go to whenyounneedafriend.com, get a copy of the book, and I'll let you know if you won the book. Thank you, Diana, for being on the show. And please remember, this is Lillian McDermott wishing you love, peace, joy, and unexpected abundance. Make it the best day ever. Good job. Whoa. That came upon me real quick. But so we're still recording. Is there anything that you would like to share before we go?
Oh my gosh. Well, this is a daily practice, and I can just share a story that happened yesterday about, you write a book, but then books continue to write themselves in your life.
Correct.
So yesterday I was on the phone with a friend of mine, or excuse me, not the phone. I call it the phone these days. We were messaging back and forth, and she's another writer, and we were talking about some things that were really depressing to us right now in publishing. And I finally got to the point with her, and I said, "Oh, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to go." It was another beautiful day here in Northern Virginia. And so I said, "I'm going to go for a walk." And so she said, that sounds like a good idea. About a mile from where I live, there's this huge, beautiful national park where Mount Vernon is. And so when I'm in a bad mood, and sometimes just when I'm in a good mood, I like to go down there and walk. It's right along the Potomac River. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
I write about that place in my last book. And so I drive down the mile and a half, park my car in the parking lot, and I look out at the river, and the sun is shining and the river is running and it's sparkling and it's just beautiful. And I jump out of my car, run down the edge of the river. I close my eyes. I feel the day. I have my hands up to the sky and I say, thank you. And then I open my eyes and I realize the reason the river is sparkling is because we've just had all this rain in Virginia. And there were thousands of plastic bottles floating on the river. And that's what the sparkling was from.
Oh.
Where the sun was hitting on this garbage.
Oh.
And
How did it get there?
we know, God only knows. Some trash container broke open or recycling bin up in West Virginia. Who knows how it happened, but literally the river was full of plastic bottles. And I looked at that and I thought, oh my gosh, isn't that just what life is like sometimes? Is you think everything is all diamonds and sparkling, and you look more closely and it's just garbage floating on the river. Mm. And it kind of broke my heart, because I was going down there and I was expecting thanks. And I had put myself in this mind, to give Thanksgiving, and then it winds up being trash. So I just ruminated on that and I walked on. And I was feeling kind of sick, frankly, about the whole thing and about my conversation with my friend. When up ahead on the path, I noticed that there was a person that had gotten off of a bicycle and was kneeling near a little pedestrian bridge that goes over a small inlet from the river. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And so I was walking and I was getting closer and closer. I noticed the person was a woman. And as I started crossing the bridge, I was just going to leave her completely alone because I thought, oh, she's praying. And I happened to glance back over my shoulder and I noticed that she was indeed kneeling, but that she wasn't praying. Her hands were full of mud and she was lifting sort of mud and dirt out of the inlet. And she was going through what was in her hands. And I looked more closely and I realized she was pulling straws and little pieces of garbage out of this muddy inlet. And so I stopped and I said to her, oh my gosh, I said, what are you doing? And she just sort of held her hands up higher like this, and the mud is dripping down, and she's got these straws. And I said, oh, you're picking up garbage. Mm-hmm. And she looked and she said, yeah. She said, I'm picking up these little bits. And she literally had a plastic bag with her, and it was full of straws and bottle caps and shards of plastic that had, broken off of something else. And she just looked at me and she said, we often miss the smallest things. And if we just pick up the little pieces, everything will change. And I literally it took my breath away. And I said, thank you. Thank you for doing that. And she said, it's my pleasure. We all have to do our part. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what she taught me a story about gratitude. She taught me that I was looking in the wrong place. Mm-hmm. And she also reminded me that gratitude results in getting on our knees and putting our hands in the mud. Yeah. And making the world a better place for everybody. And that if we all just do our part, that things really will change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is a sense, there is a sense of gratitude in picking up trash. I've adopted a strip. I live in Cape Canaveral, and
Oh,
I walk about a mile one way and a mile back. And I always bring a bag, and it's amazing how many tiny little things and that I pick up. I pick up one time I picked up like 15-pound trash bag worth of
wow.
crap on the beach. And it is sad. And I know that I cannot pick up everything, but I am grateful for the stuff that I was able to pick up at that
Right.
moment. So I was just in Miami at a conference, and I decided I was right on the water. So I decided I was going to walk on the beach in Hollywood Beach. And I didn't have a bag with me.
Oh my.
And it was torture for me to walk and see the plastic and see the wrappers and see the straws and see all the things, the foam. And it was like line up as a reminder, and we all need to do our part. We
Right.
all need to be a part of the greater good, that Romans 8, everything works out for the good of all. And it's
Right.
not just me. And it's amazing that woman became such a great teacher for you that it'll probably forever change the way you go for a walk now. I saw somebody picking up trash 2 years ago on the beach while I was walking.
Right.
And I thought, you know what? I can do the same thing.
Yeah. And I have thought about, I have to organize a big trash cleanup.
Yeah.
But what she really inspired me yesterday is to remember that, honestly, it's just each one of us picking up even a little trash,
Yeah.
that it makes a difference. And I gotten so focused on the bottles floating on the river, and how are we going to clean up that mess? And it seems so big and overwhelming, and
Yeah.
it actually disempowered me.
Correct.
But her kneeling in the mud, that, boy, it was like an angel appearing
Mm-hmm.
on that pathway yesterday. And she took me back to exactly where I needed to be and exactly what I needed to be reminded of. And she also did teach me a new thing, and that was to take a garbage bag
Yeah, I know, exactly.
when I
Oh,
walk
yeah.
along the Potomac River.
Yeah. You don't walk the beach with me without a bag in your hand. And I remember walking the beach with one of my husband's friends, and he never bent down. He just pointed to where they were.
Well,
And
some people don't like to touch it, because it is, it's,
that's what gloves are for.
that's right.
But the thing is that we can all do our fair share, and only through gratefulness, to gratitude, as you say in the book, and I think I read it in your book, as well as in the Bible, the greatest will become the least. And in
Yes, I do talk about that in the
in
book.
that position, it's like I never understood, and I love, 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 and I've attended many retreats, and I was picked to be the foot washer.
Oh, wow.
And it's the ritual that the master comes home and the servant washed the feet. And that's what was so beautiful about the Last Supper that many people miss, that here's the master washing the feet of the least. And I remember being in that position. And that is the foundation of my show. I'm a foot washer.
Wow.
And if people don't understand that, I couldn't stop crying. I was so, just going back there just makes me emotional to feel that at people's feet I am fed.
Yeah.
And that's where, if we were to just start from that place of gratitude for the very least, whether it's to pick up a straw or arrange the pickup, everybody has a purpose in life. Everybody has a purpose in life. And yes, sometimes and we need to feel whatever's happening to us. This movement of positive thoughts is good,
Right.
but be aware of what's happening to your body as you're experiencing whatever is happening in life. Deal with it, work with it, process it, and through it all, be grateful.
Yes, indeed. That's what I've learned. And I've also learned, yes, positive thoughts, absolutely. good emotions, 100%. And they always wind up in a place where I think you're on your knees in the mud serving other people. And so there is a deep and powerful connection between how we think, how we feel, where our souls are directed, and then what our actions become in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And it all begins with a thought. It all starts with a thought. We can create violence with our thought, or we can create peace. So first it's the thought, then it's the feeling, then it's the action. And so with your action plan, what would you be the last bit of pearls to share? What would be a great bit of action for our listeners and our followers to take from Diane Butler Bass?
Well, what I've been encouraging people to do is something very simple, and that is, if you can't keep a gratitude journal, which is the classic recommendation for cultivating gratitude, do something that works for you to develop a cue, a CUE, that will help you think about gratitude. And I'm trying to see if my thing is here. I have a gratitude rock, and I thought I had it right next to me, but I must have moved when I was moving the computer around. But I have a little like a river stone that just fits in the palm of my hand, and it's a white rock, and it says across it gratitude. And I'm sitting in my bedroom, and usually it is sitting right here at the edge of my bed on a on my nightstand. And so in the morning, the word gratitude is the first word I see, and it's the last word I see before I go to bed at night.
Very good.
And so it's not a journal; it's just a little word sitting right next to me as a reminder. And so I say, thank you. And some days I've actually woken up and said, oh, there's that darn gratitude rock. And there's my neighbor is doing leaf blowing at 6:30 in the morning. And all I want to do is be mad, but the rock, the little word right there, just says, okay, what are you grateful about? And then I'll say something like, gosh, I woke up today and I can hear this crazy leaf blower, and that means when it finally turns off, I'm going to hear the birds. And so I'm thankful for the capacity to be able to hear the sounds of the world. And so it's a little Pollyannish, but some days I need that moment, to take me out of just being angry at my neighbor.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. It's amazing how a simple action can completely change your entire day. Waking up and saying thank you, even before you know what the day holds, you just know I'll be grateful today. It doesn't have to be. So whatever comes our way, just know I'll be grateful. Knowing that, saying that to yourself, this neuro-linguistic programming of gratitude, some people say fake it till you make it. I say think it till you feel it.
Wow, and that's nice.
Thank you. Yeah. So, think it till you feel it, because I don't like this fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Think it till you feel it. And then once you think it, you'll feel it. When you feel it, you will act it.
Right. And then those actions, I think, actually what you're talking about with that kind of reprogramming our brains, then our actions actually make our brains different. And the cycle becomes easier the next time and deeper.
That's right.
So it really turns into a beautiful spiral of what is called a spiral of positivity by psychologists. And you can spiral downward or you can spiral upward. And both are options. And I think that is certainly one thing I learned writing this book. So thanks for this great conversation, Dave.
Well, you're great. You're a great teacher.
You reminded me of a lot of things I already know. And
you reminded me a lot. I love it when mirror, mirror on the wall, right?
That's
you
right.
live in Virginia, I live in Florida, but bottom line is the state of grace is the best state to live in, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So thank you so much, Diane Butler Bass, for this wonderful book and the reminder of the importance of gratefulness. So thank you so much. And I look forward to our next conversation with my viewing friends as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take
care. It's great
to
meet you today.
That's nice to meet you too.